South Korea's intelligence service says North Korea revised its constitution to mandate an automatic nuclear strike if Kim Jong-un is killed or incapacitated in a foreign attack, a claim that has not yet been matched in full by Reuters or AP. The change was not announced by Pyongyang. It was revealed by South Korea's National Intelligence Service in a briefing to senior members of the South Korean government. According to South Korean intelligence, the revision was adopted during the first session of the 15th Supreme People's Assembly, a detail that still needs fuller public confirmation. The timing is not incidental. It came less than a month after the event that appears to have driven the decision. The timing came after the killing of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in the opening US-Israeli strikes, an event some analysts believe likely sharpened Pyongyang's fear of decapitation. North Korea appears to have read the Iran war as a warning, and South Korean intelligence says it moved to hardwire automatic nuclear retaliation into its legal framework. South Korean intelligence says the revised text states that if command and control over North Korea's nuclear forces is endangered by hostile attack, a nuclear strike must be launched automatically and immediately. That language removes ambiguity. It codifies what may have been informal doctrine into constitutional law. Kim has command of the North's nuclear forces, but the revision establishes procedures for retaliation in the event that he is incapacitated or killed. The implication is that Pyongyang wants decapitation to look futile, though how such an order would actually be executed in a crisis remains unknown. Analysts in Seoul argue the policy may have existed in practice before, but that codifying it after the Iran war gives it far more weight. North Korea likely saw the opening strikes on Iran as proof that decapitation is no longer a theoretical threat. Whether that was the sole driver of the constitutional change is not publicly confirmed, but the timing and the content of the revision point in the same direction. An attack designed to eliminate Kim and his immediate circle would be far harder to carry out than the attacks in Iran. North Korea's borders are effectively sealed. The few foreign diplomats, aid workers, and business people from friendly nations who enter the country are closely monitored. The human intelligence that was critical to the success of the Iran strikes is virtually impossible to obtain inside North Korea. Claims about the exact intelligence methods used against Iran's leadership remain murky and should not be treated as established fact. Replicating the Iran model inside North Korea would likely be far harder, given Pyongyang's sealed environment and tightly controlled communications. Kim avoids flying, travels in a heavily armored train, and is always surrounded by bodyguards. Analysts often argue Pyongyang fears the surveillance advantage foreign militaries now hold from above, and that taking out the leadership at the outset of any conflict could prove decisive. The revision is meant to signal that any decapitation attempt would still trigger retaliation, even if the top leadership were hit. The constitutional change is not just a legal formality, it is a deterrent signal designed to make the cost of a first strike look unacceptable. While the constitutional revision was being disclosed, North Korea made a separate military announcement that carries its own weight. Kim visited a munitions factory to inspect the production of a new 155mm self-propelled gun howitzer that state media said has a striking range exceeding 60 kilometers or roughly 37 miles. According to the official Korean Central News Agency, the weapon will be deployed this year to a long-range artillery unit along the border with South Korea. Central Seoul is approximately 40 to 50 kilometers from the border. Much of Gyeonggi Province, South Korea's most populous region and home to key industrial hubs, would also fall within the new gun's range. Kim said the weapon would provide significant changes and advantages to the military's ground operations. On the same day, Kim rode aboard the destroyer choe to review its maneuverability off North Korea's west coast. He ordered authorities to hand over the ship to the Navy in mid-June as scheduled. KCNA reported that all tests for operational commissioning had progressed smoothly. The choe hyon, unveiled with significant ceremony last year, is North Korea's largest and most advanced warship. A second destroyer of the same class was unveiled but damaged during a launching ceremony. Kim has called for building two more. KCNA photos showed Kim's teenage daughter aboard the destroyer, standing behind her father as he addressed Navy sailors and eating a meal with the crew. South Korea's spy agency said last month she could be considered Kim's heir. The military announcements came alongside a broader political shift that had already been signaled but is now formalized. South Korea's intelligence service confirmed that North Korea's newly revised constitution drops all previous references to Korean unification. The changes redefine North Korean territory as only the northern half of the Korean peninsula, in line with Kim's declaration that South Korea is his country's permanent and most hostile enemy. The idea of shared statehood, which had been a constitutional aspiration since the end of the Korean War, has been formally eliminated. Kim ordered the rewriting in January 2024. The Assembly adopted it in March 2026. The dream of a unified Korea, at least on Pyongyang's terms, is now constitutionally dead. The timing of the Iran war and the North Korean constitutional change deserves attention. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a campaign that killed Iran's supreme leader and much of his inner circle in the opening hours. Less than a month later, South Korean intelligence says North Korea rewrote its highest law to make clear that any attempt to decapitate Kim would trigger automatic nuclear retaliation. One conflict on the other side of the world may have reshaped how deterrence is now being written on the Korean peninsula. That is how interconnected the current global security environment has become. What happens in Tehran does not stay in Tehran. It reaches Pyongyang within weeks and rewrites constitutions. So this is the picture. South Korea's intelligence service says North Korea revised its constitution to mandate an automatic nuclear strike if Kim Jong-un is killed or incapacitated. The revision appears to have been influenced by the killing of Iran's supreme leader, though Pyongyang has not publicly framed it that way. The revised language is designed to signal that retaliation would not depend entirely on Kim surviving the opening strike. New artillery capable of hitting Seoul will be deployed this year. The country's first destroyer will be commissioned in June. Kim's daughter appeared alongside him in an apparent signal of succession. The message is not subtle, and it appears aimed above all at Washington as much as at Seoul. North Korea is signaling that what happened to Iran's leadership on February 28th should not be attempted twice. The constitutional change, the new weapons, the sealed borders, the armored train, the tightly controlled communications, all of it points in the same direction. Pyongyang is building a system where decapitation does not end the threat. It triggers it. Whether that system would function as written in a real crisis is something no one can verify from the outside. But the signal itself is the point. It is designed to make the calculation for any future strike look different than the one that was made against Tehran. And that may be the most lasting consequence of what happened on February 28th that no one in Washington anticipated. One conflict on the other side of the world may have reshaped how deterrence is now being written on the Korean peninsula. The Constitution now formally declares South Korea a hostile state with no path to unification. The nuclear doctrine now runs on autopilot if the leadership is hit. And the country that watched Iran's supreme leader die in the opening hours of a war has decided that its own version of that story will end differently. Whether that is confidence or desperation, the law is now written, and the warning is now constitutional.